DCKO has the potential to be the best crossover event in DC history, at least in modern DC history. The very first issue, which was a whopper of an issue, was fantastic, setting up the event, giving us a bit of extra lore on why this is happening, and the setup for what this event will be, with who will be participating in it, as well as news about spin-off titles, tie-ins, and guest appearances and crossovers actually that are surprising as well. But before I get into talking about DCKO issue 1 and what we're going to be expecting in the future, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. It really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel. It shows you want to see more. I'm going to be riding high on the DC stuff going forward, and if you want, I can cover every issue of Absolute DC as it comes out. So look forward to that. Now, for this video, I'm not going to go fully in depth with DCKO. I'm just going to give a generalized summary of what we see in this issue, and then talk about what we're going to be expecting in the future, and who will be participating in this event. So if you haven't known already, DCKO is actually a massive tournament-style event that is dictated with the oncoming threat of Darkseid returning from the Absolute Universe. As if you don't know already, Darkseid, after a big convoluted thing that happened in the DC All-In Special, go read that for full context, Darkseid effectively died and was released from the mainline universe, and then became the core anchoring point of a whole new universe where he was absolute, where Darkseid energy was the core and altered the very nature of the universe. And that's how we got the Absolute Universe, where heroism, hope, inspiration, all that good stuff is on the back burner, oppressed down to the point where they have to fight even more for that, where corruption, despair, and hopelessness are at the top and are constantly winning as a natural law of that universe. And with that, Darkseid would continuously grow stronger and stronger, until now, where he will be able to reach the mainline universe and essentially make it a part of himself, as he becomes the King Omega, and basically ends up being everywhere all at once in every location, making him omnipresent in the future and slowly going into the past. Now, this stuff has been being built up with the Justice League Unlimited comic after the All-In Special, as well as the mainline Superman comic, with the introductions of everything going on with the character of Time Trapper, who is a massively evolved Doomsday with time powers. We have Grodd, we have the World Forger, and we have Booster Gold, who was disappeared in the All-In Special, but got brought back thanks to Superman and most recent stuff in the comics. Superboy Prime teamed up with a legion of superheroes to fight Darkseid's Dark Legion, which is the quote-unquote legion that was in the Absolute Universe's future, with Darkseid managed to help corrupt and bring under his side as his herald, essentially. And so they had a war across time in multiple timelines in different universes to basically subjugate them and make them a part of Darkseid himself, essentially making it so Darkseid is everything. And that's kind of how DCKO opens up, with Darkseid appearing out of nowhere everywhere at once, and with everything he touches and attacks, they essentially become a part of him, to the point where even defeats the Trinity incredibly easily. And this was a flash forward of events to come within a week. And we cut to after the events of Justice League the Omega Act, which is a prelude to DCKO, where they learn about what's going on with the future and everything. Time Trapper and the Quintessence, which are time-based characters, essentially look into the future for everything that's happening, and are essentially telling the DC heroes that essentially they're screwed. They have no way of winning or beating Darkseid, and so the only real way for them to kind of survive is to essentially restart the universe, do a reboot like the New 52, which they actually kind of mentioned that happened, with the history being splintered off, but eventually coming together and merging, like what happened with DC Rebirth, and eventually with Doomsday Clock, which I need to reread. I'll make a video on that, because that was an interesting thing to read. And they also give, like I said at the beginning, the info dump of how Darkseid got all this power, the universe he created, everything that led up to this point, and thus everyone's speculating what's going to happen to how they can beat Darkseid. And something that they come up with is that they have to go to a Heart of Apocalypse, which is at the center of this universe's Earth, which has been collecting Darkseid energy, Omega energy, for the last year. And there have been inconceivable with fire pillars erupting from the Earth and parademons appearing off of the Earth at random points across this universe, as well as the most recent stuff that happened with Gorilla Grodd in Justice League Unlimited. But with all that said, the only way for them to beat Darkseid is for them to get the power of the Heart of Apocalypse, the Omega energy, and become an equivalent to Darkseid as a King Omega. But the issue with that is that they're heroes. They do good, they're hopeful, they help others. In order for them to get the heart, once they try and get the power, it will basically make a tournament-like setting with multiple rounds to test them to see if they're worthy of the heart. And a part of that is to generate Darkseid energy as they fight, and they'll have to fight each other ruthlessly, no mercy, until the death. Now, obviously, this gets power scalers up in a tizzy and makes writers incredibly excited, like Scott Snyder, who is basically one of the helms of this massive crossover event, basically to mash the action figures together for really cool fights and interesting matchups. And we had a tease of this bracket before the event started, and I'll get into the bracket later on in the video. But essentially, after talking about this, Superman just fully declines, but Bruce and Diana basically convince him that once they become King Omega, someone becomes King Omega, they'll be able to just bring everyone back to life, most likely, because they'll have more or less omnipotent power, if not for a limited time, up until they defeat Darkseid. And this kind of ties into the board game aspect at the beginning of the issue, where it said that Superman only really likes to play games where everybody can win. And they try to tell Superman this is their best option until he finally relents. And so they have a week to prepare, not only using Mr. Terrific's T-spheres to find in every single villain on the planet and basically trap them in another dimension so they don't cause any issues, which they all question the moral ethics of it, just like Mr. Terrific, but this is a special circumstance, and they have no real choice, because God forbid if one of these villains, like the Joker of all characters, entered this tournament and somehow won and got that power, who knows what would happen, or even Lex Luthor. Valid points for all of this, and that's why they're going to this degree of doing all this. Then they address the world, saying what's going on, that they're going to protect them, but in worst case scenarios, they're going to essentially prep the world for dimensional evacuation, essentially, as well as keeping a good chunk of heroes behind on Earth while the tournament is going on, which will lead into a lot of these different tie-in events throughout DCKO. They spend the day with their family and loved ones, seeing what they're fighting for, but also seeing how scared people are, while also trying to make themselves more confident that this is for the best and that they can win this. And then, on the 5th day of everything, they prep with new weapons. Batman with a Justice Buster version 2, which is insane. Diana gets her God Killer armor. Cyborg upgrades himself with a Father Box. And Superman gives himself what he would probably call the Dawn's Day gloves, which are just 2 fighting MMA gloves, but in the knuckles are miniature exploding suns, which basically pack a wallop, and also the fact that Superman actually has miniature yellow suns at all times kind of makes him incredibly powerful. So he won't, unless these are gone, he will keep getting a constant influx of yellow sun radiation to keep him powered. So that's really smart. That is actually really smart to keep that on him. But after they prep, get their weapons, they all head to a point where they know the heart is located and use Booster Gold, who has not only quantum energy from time travel, but also after spending years in another timeline and dimension, getting basically bombarded with Omega energy, he uses that power to blast a hole in the heart, and thus allowing multiple heroes to break through. And once all these heroes break it through, it kind of ties back to the first opening page of the issue with Superman, as it says that the heart basically showed them an image of them all winning this tournament, having all this power to immediately flash them to brief for the moment, being met with these demonic eldritch gatekeepers as they're waiting for the rest of the participants to enter the tournament. And once everybody makes it, they have to go and race across, get past the gatekeepers to make it to the doorways at the end to make it for the actual tournament. And when it begins, Billy Batson is killed instantly by a club of one of the Guardians before he has the chance to turn into Shazam. So that's something. Now Superman begins to punch the hell out of these monsters for killing Billy, because obviously his friend and essentially someone who he basically mentored for a degree was just killed in front of him before he transformed as a defenseless kid. So of course Superman would beat the ever-living hell out of these monsters. But Batman shoots him in the back with missiles, telling him to get his head in the game, as all the other heroes are rushing past these Guardians to try and make it to the doorways for the actual tournament. Superman's fighting through, and we actually get a nice full 2 pages of like a game board showcasing everybody fighting to make it to the end, with characters dying, really nice cameos with other characters, and Superman actually fighting to make sure that more people are making it to the end, trying to make sure that as little of his friends die as possible, even though the whole point of this is to be ruthless and show no mercy to anybody, even his own friends. But Superman can't fight his nature. And then when pretty much the last of everyone gets it through, the only one who hasn't made it through was Batman, but he actually makes it to Superman, telling him that he has to get his head in the game and that he can't keep doing all this because there is a plan and that he needs to focus. But right as Batman says this, the biggest twist of this crossover, Batman is stabbed in the chest, and from that harpoon comes out a bang sign as Batman is killed through the chest by the Joker, as not many of the villains show up. Joker, Lex Luthor, King Shark, Giganta, Cheetah, and Starro of all characters show up, with Joker just saying, "Guess Batman doesn't always win," rubbing it in. But as Batman is fading away, getting dusted with the killing blow, tells Superman to remember what he said. And then we get a massive crossover spread of multiple panels of the villains just breaking through to make it towards the gateways, killing other heroes who have yet to make it through. And Lex actually has a look of pity and just superiority towards Superman, and he's like, with the look like, "Go save a cat from a fucking tree," which I think is really cool, as this just gets Superman more and more pissed as he breaks it through, and unfortunately he has to ignore his other friends, allies, and others, as he becomes the last person to enter the final bracket of the tournament. As then, we have all 32 participants in this massive tournament, and we have the bracket for it. But that doesn't mean we don't have a couple of surprises. First off, the narrator of this whole issue is revealed to be the Heart of Apocalypse, saying that despite everything that's going on, he knows who wins, and apparently none of them do, as it is incredibly interesting for that to be the case. He also introduces Darkseid's Destroyers, which are teased and pretty much are confirmed to be the absolute versions of Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman, as they will somehow take part in the tournament as well in different rounds. And in New York Comic Con, we also got confirmation that a lot of different characters from other publications and comics are going to show up, like Homelander from The Boys, Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat, Vampirella. There are a bunch of different characters being thrown in. Heck, Annabelle from the Conjuring series of movies and comics and stuff like that, which is insane. Please let the Ninja Turtles be in here, maybe? Or someone else, maybe throw in Invincible for all we know, because we already have the Boys and stuff. Throw in Omni-Man, that'd be pretty fun to see. But they'll most likely be parts of different rounds in DC KO to make things a bit more interesting, outside of it being just the basic heroes and villains versus villains in this massively ruthless tournament to the death. And we end this issue off with the tease and reveal that Darkseid is actually already in the mainline universe, possessing Booster Gold, waiting for the outcome at the end of this tournament. And basically this all seems to be one giant setup and trap to set things up for Darkseid to be the true and only King Omega, perhaps. Also, it might have been Darkseid to free the villains from this extra-dimensional prison that they were sent to by Mr. Terrific, as we don't know how they made it to the Heart of Apocalypse, or how they made it out or knew of the tournament in the first place. But with Darkseid there, possessing Booster Gold without the rest of the quintessence knowing, this just makes things even more intense and more high stakes than normal. And that's kind of how the issue ends. Now lastly, let's go over the brackets for the tournament for all 32 participants. We have Superman versus Giganta, Captain Atom versus Power Girl, Guy Gardner versus Firestorm, Jay Garrick Flash against Cheetah, Aquaman versus King Shark, Connor Hawk against Hawkman. Connor Hawk is the current Green Arrow right now. Lex Luthor versus Black Lightning, Etrigan the Demon against Supergirl, Wonder Woman versus Starro, Lobo versus Plastic Man, that's actually one I'm really excited to see, Swamp Thing versus Vixen, Cyborg versus Batwoman, and what was originally supposed to be Batman versus Star Sapphire, Joker has taken his spot in the surprise twist at this issue, as now he's fighting Star Sapphire, with then it being Red Hood versus Damian Wayne, the current Robin, or previous Robin essentially, Zatanna versus Big Barda, and finally Harley Quinn versus Metamorpho. As everything will progress throughout these tournaments, with each round, and potentially the test of these crossover characters showing up to make things more interesting and more complicated, which I am unbelievably excited about. And last thing I want to mention, now that the Joker took Batman's place in this bracket, the winner of Joker's bracket will have to fight the winner of the Red Hood Damian bracket, and there is a Red Hood tie-in that was announced in New York Comic Con for DCKO. That the caption was, "This time it's personal." Chances are they just spoiled who's winning those fights. Joker is supposed to seemingly going to win against the fight against Star Sapphire. Can't wait to see how he does that. And Red Hood is seemingly going to beat Damian, which is an insane thing to think about, considering that Damian is a highly trained assassin and is incredibly intelligent. But honestly, if this sets up for a Red Hood versus Joker fight, with this being no holds bar, no mercy, I really want Scott Snyder and whoever else is writing for that round to let Jason win. Get the catharsis he needs after getting beat by a freaking Crobat from the Joker. Heck, have him beat the Joker with a Crobat to death in this fight, because The man deserves it. He's been through a lot. His new comic run got canceled because, well, it was going to be awful anyway, as well as some stuff with the writer. I'm not going to get into. But either way, Red Hood needs a win. He has been incredibly inconsistent for years. At the very least, he deserves to get that one-up on the Joker and get true blue payback. And I'm really hoping that happens, and that'll be really damn cool to see and very satisfying. But that's the events of DCKO. Crossovers we're expected to see so far, and the final brackets with a tease of one that many of us want to see going forward. Now, Superman seems to be the protagonist of this crossover so far, and chances are he'll probably become the winner, but who knows? We might get a curveball at the end of this to see who will win this overall tournament, and I'm curious to see how this will happen going forward. I love tournament arcs. I'm an anime fan, so of course, tournament arcs and stuff are always exciting and fun, but this one encourages being ruthless and killing your opponent, so we'll get to see all of the heroes we've met thus far fight no holding back against anybody, even their own friends. So I'm curious to see how this is going to lead into things and how it'll affect these characters fighting in the future. But let me know what you're thinking of DCKO right now. What fights are you excited to see? What matchups do you hope to see as the tournament progresses? What characters from other comics and universes you think will show up to interfere in these matches to make it more interesting? And do you want me to cover each issue of DCKO and certain tie-ins? Let me know in the comments down below. And with all that said and done, I hope you all have an awesome day.